Campaigns to increase the minimum wage have met with resistance, mainly from Republicans in Congress, but they're moving ahead on many fronts around the country. In Massachusetts, these include efforts at the State House, but also a push to build support through advisory questions on the ballot. The plan is to have a question appear in 6 legislative districts, including 4 in Boston. To tell us about the 15 Now campaign are 2 of the community organizers from Boston, Seamus, Whelan, and Toya. Chester, thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
I want to start with Seamus. Just talk about people you know in Boston, working people. Why is this so important? Because there are a lot of people in Boston who make quite a bit more than $15 an hour.
Yes, but in Boston at the moment, low-wage jobs are the new jobs being created. I think since 2009, since the downturn, the majority of new jobs have been low-wage jobs. And as you know, Chris, the cost of living in Boston, these type of jobs mean poverty wages, and people just aren't able to, raise their families on these type of wages.
And for people who are not working at poverty wages, we should remind them that you want to go up to 15, but where are we now exactly?
The Massachusetts minimum wage is $8 an hour.
Toya, Chester, talk about where you come from, East Boston. What do you hear? What do you see about this?
Well, in East Boston, we have a high immigrant population, and so this is the base of where the low-wage workers are coming from. We see people going into work very, very early in the morning, ending work at 3 o'clock, going to their second job, coming home very, very late. When we're out talking to the people in the streets, they're very, very on board about this issue.
What about people in the hospitality industry? These are people who need tips. Does this help them or complicate things? How does it work?
Good. So Massachusetts is one of the 43 states in the country that does have a tip penalty, which says that tipped workers do not need to make the minimum wage that everyone else makes. So in Massachusetts, our minimum wage for tipped workers is $2.63. But to be qualified as a tipped worker, you only need to make $20 a month in tips. So the idea is that these tips would compensate the lack of wages, but if you're only making $20 a month in tips, that's not at all enough.
Seamus, one of the things that you must have heard, because we've heard this before whenever there were attempts to raise the minimum wage, is that if you have to pay people more money, at least some people, that means, there could be fewer jobs. That companies, especially small employers, they might say, I just have to eliminate a position to make this work out.
Yeah, wherever the idea of the minimum wage has been raised, usually the mass media, the corporations come up with these scare stories of it's going to lead to hyperinflation, mass unemployment. But if you look nationwide, wherever minimum wage increases have happened, none of these things have happened. It's led to a boost in the economy. Because when workers get more than the minimum wage, they usually spend it in the local economy. When you give, say, corporations tax breaks and subsidies, that money is taken out of the local economy. It's usually sent to tax havens for these companies to avoid paying taxes. So minimum wage, it actually will be a huge benefit and a huge stimulus boost to the economy, particularly if it's a sizable increase like $15 an hour.
So another thing going on here is you can raise the wage, but a dead-end job is a dead-end job. And I think what a lot of the people at the bottom really want is not just a dead-end job. They want something better. They want to move up. They want opportunities. So how does this wage increase fit into that?
Well, if you give people the opportunity to better themselves, for example, if you give them more money, they could go and get an education maybe or have time to better themselves in that way. But the reality is that the jobs that are being put into the economy are these low-wage jobs. People are graduating with college degrees and they're still working these low-wage jobs. So regardless of if they want to be here or not, they are, and they need to be able to make enough money to live.
Seamus, we're talking about all different kinds of people here. This could be at one end of the spectrum, a teenager whose family is doing pretty well, but they're working in a fast food business. But on the other hand, I guess there are adults, there are people raising kids who have these jobs. So how do you see the spectrum?
Well, I think the impression is often given that minimum wage jobs are just teenagers. And actually, if you look at the demographic of who is your typical low-wage, minimum wage job, it's not teenagers are a minority of minimum wage earners. The typical worker is an adult woman. they make up the majority, usually often with kids. So these jobs are encompassing more and more of the population. They're not, people's impression of, this is the first job of a teenager, and it's a step up into the employment ladder. It's not. More and more of the population are being, having the only option is to take these minimum wage jobs.
Toya, talk about the places where you're going to have this advisory question on the ballot. This is going to be, I guess, 4 of the House districts in Boston we're looking at here?
So we have East Boston, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, and West Roxbury. These are very traditionally working class neighborhoods, especially East Boston and Dorchester. And even we're seeing in Jamaica Plain, you have a huge, huge immigrant population. So these are a lot of the people that are working these minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, and plus some restaurants there too. Seamus, what's the point of an advisory question? Because on the one hand, there is a push at the State House to have something approved there. And then an advisory question, it's not binding. So why is it important to have some kind of result from these districts?
Well, 15 Now is a national organization that emerged out of the movement that developed in Seattle for 15. So I ran as a candidate for social alternative in the last election, and one of my principal demands was for 15. And in Seattle, we actually got a social alternative candidate elected with almost 100,000 votes. And the pressure in Seattle from the mass movement that developed around that has really put Seattle to the forefront of this movement. But we feel in Boston, New England, the initiatives like ballot initiatives, advisory questions, allows us to actually get out there, talk to people, and get them involved. Because we believe that the only way you can actually achieve something like a high minimum wage is by building a grassroots movement, and this allows us to take the first step in that direction.
So it makes a difference then if on the one hand people look at the voting results and they say, well, not many people bothered with this, and on the other hand, if they look and they saw, 80% of the voters, let's say, cast a vote, that would send a message?
Yes, definitely. If it passes, it would send a message. But during last year's council elections, we found that the echo we get from when we talk to people on the street, what people need is to raise their expectations. And 15, when you talk to people and explain that actually 15 is quite a modest proposal, considering that Australia has a minimum wage of $17 an hour, and that really the wage should be almost $22 an hour if wages kept up with productivity and the growth of wealth in society.
Toya, this is also giving people one more reason to come out and vote, and if they're interested in more information about this campaign, someplace they can look for that online?
Sure, we have a national website, and it's 15now.org, or we are on Facebook at 15 Now New England.
All right, thank you very much for being with us, Toya Chester and Seamus Whelan.
Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you.
15 Now. Up ahead, the baseball experience coming to a park in your neighborhood, but first, this message.